Hello and welcome to the BurnCast. I'm Brady Byrne.
And I'm Kim Cass.
Today we're looking at a book called Beasts, War of Reckoning by author T. Mclennan. As always, any criticisms directed towards the authors of works that we discuss are exaggerated for entertainment purposes and are not meant to be taken personally. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show. Let's talk about Beasts, War of Reckoning.
Let's talk about Beasts.
Yeah, so this is apparently the third book in a series titled Beasts. We've got Beasts First Encounter, Beasts Uprising, and Beasts War of Reckoning.
Now, it is funny because when I started reading this book, I had no idea that it was the third in a series, and you can base that on my bad research, but the book didn't seem too, messy from a third book perspective. I got well into it before discovering that it was the third part in the series.
Yeah, and it also didn't do the thing we usually see when we get into, the second or third book, and that we start from there, that it basically gives you all of the information from the first couple of books. There are just a few characters, maybe, some relationship issues that we didn't see the origins of, but it's really not hard to follow what's happening. So very good job writing the third book in a series that at the same time feels like, a continuation of some story we didn't read, but also doesn't make us feel lost.
Yeah, no, I was pleasantly surprised when I discovered that it was the third book in a series, and I will start this episode with commendations for that sole reason.
Yeah, and we'll continue this episode with commendations because I actually quite enjoyed this stupid book.
Somehow.
So basically, War of Reckoning is sort of a cross between James Cameron's Avatar and Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
Because it is about a impending war between humans, or as our protagonists know them, the man-beasts, and the Sasquatch race.
And just like in Avatar, the Sasquatch have a sort of a pairing with nature. Just like in Avatar with the blue people, they connect their squiggly bits to the other animals' squiggly bits, and they sort of mind meld or whatever.
Yeah. And
in this, they don't really do anything cool like that, but they just sort of we're the snake guys, and we're the cougar people, it's framed like that.
Yeah. They have different Sasquatch tribes, and some of them are allied with the eagles, and some are allied with the wolves, and we've got the snake tribe Sasquatches.
And they go, no.
Yeah, they hiss.
And the cougar people, they go, rawr.
Yeah, so it's a bit unclear what their actual connection is, but it doesn't really matter, They've got a pretty well thought out culture between the Sasquatch kingdoms, which are a bit disparate. The story starts off with two Sasquatch characters named Cole and Slate fleeing into the mountains where they discover a whole tribe of other Sasquatch that they didn't know about. So these two characters are a part of, they just call it the Northern Tribe, and they're allied with the wolves. And they're discovering that there are other Sasquatch out there like them. They didn't even know it at first. And so a lot of the story is some of these characters going to other Sasquatch tribe nations in the mountains, hidden from human society, and discovering that there are actually many more of them than they thought in the first place.
Now, we talked just briefly that it was a cross between Avatar and Planet of the Apes, but I also felt like it was a little bit Game of Thronesy.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the way that it's just clearly you have the Northern Tribe, which is the wolves, yeah?
Yes.
Like the Starks. And then you have the Southern Tribe is the snakes, like Dawn in Game of Thrones. They're the snake people.
Yes.
And then the big kingdom is the cougar people. And of course, in America, you couldn't have lions.
Right.
So they're just the cougar people, but that's very obviously supposed to be the lions.
The Lannisters, yeah.
Yeah, it's the Lannisters, and it's sigh. You had a good imagination, but you couldn't stretch it far enough. You could.
Yeah, but I would say a lot of that stuff, despite the story not being the most inspired narrative.
Oh, it's so much better than everything else. This story, best book of the season.
Yeah.
Sadly, it is.
This is maybe the best thing we've read for the season. And I am sincere when I say that, but it's also maybe the stupidest book we've read.
I mean,
it's just, because so much of the dialogue is unintentionally hilarious, and the like whole war against the humans and that side of things, like man versus nature, like the delivery of the themes is so childish.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is also the most complete.
Yeah, it's functioning. Like, it's a functioning story.
Yeah, it's the most complete story, and it has the most developed characters. And I actually really did find myself actually enjoying this very stupid book a lot.
Yeah. Now, if this podcast was about reviewing cars, most of the cars that we would look at wouldn't have wheels.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like they wouldn't function as cars, and that's why we rate them so badly. But this car, this one drives. It literally, it's not the best car in the world.
No.
In fact, it's pretty low on the scale of cars, but it drives. It actually moves forward.
Yeah. It's a shitty car with a lot of personality.
Yeah.
And I had a fun ride with it.
Yeah.
So we've got our Sasquatches, and they're heading into the mountains because they are sort of fleeing away from human hunters. And they discover this greater kingdom of Sasquatch. And they warn the Lord there, his name is Lord Rodick, that an impending war with the man-beasts is on the horizon. The story takes place around the time of the First World War. And they believe that right now is the best time to strike against them because they are at war with each other.
Now, as far as character motivations go and things like that, I would say that when the story started up and you have these characters and they find this new kingdom of Sasquatch and they meet them and they greet them and they go into their world and they tell them about this war and all of that. And honestly, I was there 100%.
Yeah.
They seemed to be like totally about what they're about. They felt sincere. I mean, it's like kind of silly. Again, you have like, you're following Sasquatches and the whole time you're like, what is this Wookiee shit? You know, like, but no, I was there and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense for them to like want to fight them and be like, no, we have to strike now. You know, what do we do? Run and hide the whole time?
Yeah. And the Sasquatch are not entirely united on this idea.
No, yeah.
You know, our main character, Cole, he is really gung-ho with the war because his brother, Arok, was slain by a man-beast. And so he's coming in thinking, you know what, we got to take the nature back, basically.
Yeah.
And the Sasquatch Kingdom, Lord Rodick, he says, I understand now your reasoning for war, but is that the right decision? And could we actually win if we did? And Cole says, you think we have a little more than 10,000 Sasquatch, but they don't know about the eagles and the cougars, do they?
The book just frames animals as like hyper lethal. Like, oh god, if they unleash the fucking rattlesnakes, the war is won.
Yeah. And the other Sasquatch are always like, look, the man beasts have the fire machines. How do you plan to fight against that?
We got those eagles.
But we've got the cougars and the snakes. And they're just like, oh shit, you're right. Like,
no shit, the black diamond rattlesnakes.
Ooh. Yeah, and even later on, the humans are like, are the Sasquatch really a threat to us? And they're like, you don't understand. They're allied with the snakes. Shit, snakes, like.
Every time I read one of those, I was just like, oh, Jesus Christ, no, not the snakes. Like, oh, we're doomed. Like,
yeah.
Talking about, like, they've made an alliance with the cougars and the wolves. Along with the eagles, they have an alliance with the cougars. And then it says, she let that sink in. And when I hit them... Like, oh, shit. It's like, oh, it's supposed to be so like, oh shit, that's heavy news. The fucking cougars, like, oh my god.
And so, after hearing their reasoning for wanting to go to war, Lord Rodick convenes with the elders of his tribe to discuss the possibility of war with the man-beasts. And I would say that Cole, although he is a bit justified in wanting to go to war with the man-beasts, is a bit of an idiot at this point.
Yeah.
He's so sure he wants to go to war with the humans, but his confidence completely falls apart when the elders ask him, like, some very basic questions.
Right. He literally can't answer any of them.
Yeah. They're like, how do you plan to fight them?
And he's like, look, guys, to be honest, I haven't thought about it. Like,
Yeah, he's like, what's your fallback plan if we lose? And, you know, what if we reveal ourselves and this causes consequences for the rest of the Sasquatch race? And he's like, I didn't think about any of that. But so basically, he's ready to go to war. The greater Sasquatch kingdom isn't quite sold on it. They understand that maybe they should, but they're not entirely convinced. They're saying basically, you know, maybe we should prepare for war, but wait until it's actually a necessity. There's no reason for us to strike first because humans don't really know about the Sasquatch yet. they've only killed this one, and they didn't recover the body. And so it's not like the humans are really coming after them.
Yeah.
Cole just believes that at some point they will be discovered, and they should strike first before the opportunity comes.
Yeah. Now, I liked that plot point of they sort of add in the real myth of like Bigfoot and the Sasquatch and things like that. How it's like there's these groups in real life that's like, oh, if you can bring us a Sasquatch or, you know, provide any evidence, we'll reward you with money.
Yeah.
And that comes into the story as like, oh, they've got like bounties out on Sasquatch, you know? Like,
yeah.
I was a little bit confused because they didn't really explain it that like, how did the Sasquatch know that the humans have bounties?
Well, they have their human allies who trade notes with them and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I was also confused about like how they speak and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Are they speaking English? How did they communicate with the animals?
It doesn't matter. I mean,
I did not think about it.
Sasquatch are like highly intelligent, and they can speak English. They can read the human newspapers.
Yeah, they have a very progressive, liberal governmental system.
Yeah,
you know, Sasquatch life is very pleasant,
and that's where I was a bit confused with. Like, I'm not really sure what this allegory of war is for. You know, we've read stories that have tried to do like the man versus nature thing, but the whole aspect of like Sasquatch being representative of nature doesn't really make sense, because man ruining nature themes are usually pretty interesting because it's like a unilateral conflict. Like, humans are organized and they have an agenda to exploit animals and the environment, while animals are just kind of living without any major societal hierarchy or alignment to anything. They're kind of innocent. And so the Sasquatch argue for war against humanity because they say that the humans don't regard them as living creatures, or at least intelligent ones.
But they haven't interacted with them at all.
I know. And, you know, where something like Planet of the Apes does a similar story, it includes the idea that the apes are as intelligent as humans, and then it's a conflict over dominance of the species, and not so much about a disregard for environmentalism or respect for animals.
It mixed up its themes.
Yeah.
It kind of got a little bit confused with itself. It also kind of falls apart in the way that in something like Avatar, the humans are coming and they're like literally destroying all the land. They're coming and they're coming hard.
Yeah.
And in this, like, the Sasquatch, especially like the Big Kingdom, exists in like complete peace.
Yeah.
They are completely hidden from humans at large, and even the like other tribes. I mean, they're living in hiding, but they want it kind of that way.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, your land isn't really being cut into, so why are you so desperate? And I get it, like, if you're that intelligent to be like, okay, but they will eventually find us and stuff like that, but what? Are humans just going to find, like, a city of Sasquatch and be like, burn it to the ground? Like,
yeah, I mean,
burn that shit.
That's what they think. So this is really much less a man versus nature story and more of a culture versus culture.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter that the Sasquatch are Sasquatch. It could be just any other race of humans.
Yeah.
Because they haven't had enough interaction with them to know that they're intelligent, or to even disregard them as unintelligent.
Yeah.
So it really lacks that like one-sided conflict that man versus nature stories have, where man is callous and wicked and nature is unwitting and innocent. So I don't know what the fuck this story is supposed to be then. Just a general allegory on war is bad, I guess.
But it is funny how, like, in other books, we can't critique those sort of things. We can't even dig into those sort of things because there is no story. There is no themes. Like, there is nothing to get mixed up because it's so surface level. And now with this book, we can actually say, well, there is a story. And, you know, these are the problems with it. And, you know, this is why it trips over itself or what have you. It's like, this is an episode of the BurnCast. This is some sort of book review show. Like.
Yeah, what the fuck is going on? And I mean, that's all stuff we just pulled from the first chapter.
Yeah.
But so as the story goes on, we are introduced to the other side of this conflict. We've got a couple humans. We've got a human character named Ben, who is coming back from fighting in the war. And we've got his uncle, whose name is Sam. Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam, yeah.
I know. I just moved past it.
Phoned that one in.
We've got another character, Ben's love interest. Her name is Emma. For some reason, her name is Emma Watson. Again, I don't know if that's on purpose or...
Phoned it in, yeah.
It doesn't really matter. And then we've got a couple other characters. We've got Sam's neighbors, who are also parents of a child who went off to war, and they sort of resent Ben because he made it back and their child didn't. And there's a bit of conflict between them, some old beefs that haven't been squashed, probably some development in the previous book.
Old beefs that haven't been squashed, or some beefs that haven't been Sasquatched?
Yeah. Well, there is some Sasquatch squashing in this story as well.
Yeah.
On both sides.
Yeah.
They do the squashing and
they get squashed. Yeah.
But so there's a lot of talk now as Ben comes back from war that another war is about to start up between man and the Sasquatch.
The real war. The Great War is over. Now the real war begins.
Yeah, and they are all worried about this. One of the Sasquatches, named Grimwall, has been imprisoned before this story started for trying to make peace with the man-beasts.
Yeah.
So he put them at risk for revealing himself, and so he's been put in jail, and his wife is going out to relay some of this information to Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
And he apologizes for, the difficulties that they're facing, that her husband was locked up. And she tells him, "Look, Sam, I know there are good man-beasts." And
it's just every time it comes to the dialogue, it's like you just end up cracking up.
It's just so eye-rolling, but it's not supposed to be funny, but it's always funny. And she's like, "Look, I know there are good man-beasts, but Sam, there are many more of us than any of you expected." And they play this off again as if having Sasquatches, cougars, eagles, wolves, and now snakes would be enough to take over the world from humans who have machine guns and bombs.
And intelligent brains.
Yeah, and every time a human hears about this, they're like, "We're so fucked." Like, after Ben returns from war, and he's all happy to finally be done with that part of his life, Ben says, "I will tell you, I'll be happy to never see or hear about a war again. Thank God this one is just about over." He looked up at his uncle's long silence. Frowning, he asked, "What is it?" Swallowing, Sam wondered if now was the right time. Then he thought, when would it ever be a good time? And he says, "Unfortunately, your days of dealing with war may not be over."
It's so intense.
Staring at his uncle in disbelief, Ben watched as he topped up the glasses. What? What does that mean?" Sam returned, placing a glass in front of Ben. "I mean another war is brewing." He stared at Ben intently. "A war between us and the Sasquatch." Like, it's not supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be like, oh shit.
Oh my God.
But you can't write the word Sasquatch without getting a grim from me.
Like, if this was written in a world, it's because in this world, the humans are like us. They think that the Sasquatch is just like an urban myth.
Yeah.
So, like, you still think about it from that front. If it was like the Sasquatch were a big empire or whatever, then it wouldn't be funny because, like, the people would just be like, "Oh shit, the Sasquatch, like, they're a huge fucking empire of nasties," Like,
yeah.
It's sort of more intimidating if the characters know, but you would just be like, "Oh fuck," like, "Oh no, Bigfoots are coming for us," like, with snakes, like
with snakes, yeah. And the Sasquatch are also very convinced that they are actually a threat too.
Yeah,
when Sasquatch are arguing over like, should we go to war, should we not? They're asking like, "Oh, what happens when they decide to live here in this area? What happens when they build a whole town right above you? How will you get out? What if they want to dig deep for a tall building? What if they dig deep enough to discover halls and rooms and Sasquatch?"
And then the word shakes me, like...
Yeah, and then they pause and they say, "What will you and your snakes do then?" And one of the snake tribe people says, "Man beasts are no match for us and our snake allies." It's just like... And then he makes a hissing sound.
The more I actually think... I was so in this book as well, and like... The more I actually think about the premise, the more I just can't.
Yeah, like, after Ben hears about this coming war with the Sasquatch from Sam, it says, he sat there stunned in silence, trying to take everything in his uncle had told him. War? Wolves, cougars, snakes, and eagles? Plus more Sasquatch than they ever thought possible? Would they stand a chance?
Oh, fuck.
It's like, everyone is taking this very seriously.
A post-World War I America is set to be, like, fucking destroyed by snakes and cougars.
Yeah.
I was imagining, because they didn't really talk about how they were going to utilize all these animals,
No, what the fuck is a snake army gonna do against a tank?
Yeah. Yeah, like, can you just imagine, like, a tank and, like, just random snakes, like, slithering all over it, like, down the barrel, like,
What about the eagles?
Yeah, I kind of thought you could have, like, the eagles, like, they could be your air force, and they, like, drop the snakes in, you know, and it, like, launch them like predator strike missiles.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to see that. But so they part ways, and Sam tells this Sasquatch lady, Arella is her name, that he needs time to think of what they could do to prevent a war with the Sasquatches. And so we go back and we find a little bit more about what's going on with Cole. And he's been made into an elder of this new Sasquatch society that he found. Got himself a honey sweet Sasquatch named Sierra.
Like, again, it's all funny, the names and the dialogue, but we have an example of something, again, done very well, and perhaps better than any other book we've read so far, except for maybe Bacterium 264, is that this story features a time jump.
Yes.
A good time jump, a relevant time jump. You have these characters imprisoned, Grimmel, and his wife is sort of under house arrest, I guess you call it.
Yeah.
You know, she's not allowed to leave the caves.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to be for like 4 years. And then this period happens where Ben comes back from war. The Sasquatches have prepared sort of for battle a little bit more.
Yeah.
And Grimmel's sentence has been carried out. So you have the plots move forward and the time's gone forward and it's done in a way that's not confusing and it's relevant and oh my god, this is a real book. Like,
yeah, we don't need to see what happened to Grimmel 4 years in prison. Like, if it's not important, you know, get us to the part where the story actually continues, and it does.
And it does, yeah. So thank you, T. Mclennan. Thank you.
Yeah, and so the story does keep moving along. Sam tells Ben's girl, Emma, about the Sasquatch. And his plan to perhaps prevent a war with them is to get her to write an article in her paper about them.
Oh, God, that was so funny.
Yeah, she basically writes an article, a hypothetical situation, asking people that if Sasquatch were real, how would people feel about it?
Yeah, she writes this piece. Emma Watson writes this piece. And it goes, do you believe in Sasquatch? Well, let's suppose for a moment that they are real. Would... if not only are they real, but they have a modern secret society, that they are cultured, speak many languages, have traditions, education, and most all feelings, that they love, they feel sadness, pain, and hate. If all of the above were true, do you believe they should have the same basic rights as humans? Do you think that they should be allowed to live freely in the world and not have to stay hidden? Or would you fear them because they look different than you?
Ooh.
I'm doing a case study and wanted this article to help me. Every week, I am open to all opinions of how people would actually feel. I will select certain ones to print each week in the paper. I will not be biased and I will print all types of opinions as long as their language is respectful for publishing. And then Sam reads the article and rereads the article. And he thinks, well, if that didn't get people talking, then nothing would. Like, it's like the shittiest article I've read. And I love how it's like, this is a book, and there's like a journalistic, like Emma Watson is a journalist, you know?
Yeah.
And this is her journal piece, and it's like shittily written with like grammatical errors, and it's like...
Yeah, it's like written by a young teenager.
Yeah, even if you just ignore all of that, it's like, hey, everyone, what if Sasquatches were totally, like, real or whatever, and they totally had feelings and shit?
And that's the thing, is, like, the people who write in with their opinions are also, like, super genuine about it. They're like, if Sasquatch were real, they don't deserve shit. Like, we would hunt them and murder them.
Yeah.
And some other people write in and are like, no, every living creature deserves its rights.
Oh, God.
We get it. Like, it's a commentary on equal rights.
Yeah.
And the development of that section of the story, a character named Amelia from a women's suffrage group catches on to this article that Emma Watson has written. And she's, like, really interested in it. She wants to meet with Ben and Sam and that sort of thing. And she barges into Emma's office and she says, I'm sorry for barging in like this. I've been told I can be a little pushy. It's just that I'm so passionate about equal rights. She asks about who the article is really about. And she says, oh, I'm sorry, Amelia. I really can't say. And then Amelia says, it's a race thing, obviously. Is it indigenous? Asians? They're like, no, none of those. Look, I just wanted to write an article and see what response would be. I want to, run it a couple more weeks and see. And she's like, doesn't matter. It's brilliant. And she's like all on board with this, just fully convinced that it's probably about some human race that they're not revealing yet. And all of the characters are like sweating and pulling on their collar like, ooh, we better not let her find out that it's actually really about Sasquatches.
But I was like, okay, why would someone come up with like a hypothetical? Like, it's too controversial to talk about a real race of people and make an article on that. So let's just subtract the race out and put Sasquatch in there.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It's like if I went like, the Hong Kong protests, that's too divisive. Let's say they're cougar people, like
the cougar Sasquatches. But so back in the Sasquatch tribes, we have a lot of palace intrigue. At the main kingdom, there's a big vote and no one wants to go to war. So Cole goes off to meet the snake tribe people to see what their opinion is. They go back to the kingdom and they are talking about, the snake tribe people, they gave us this food and the king of the Sasquatch eats it and he gets poisoned. And then there is a lot of deception going on.
It's very Game of Thrones.
Yeah. Was it one of the northern Sasquatch? Or was it the snake people? Or, you were just there. You brought some of their venom here. And it's actually quite interesting to read about because these characters are not... They're stupid in the way that they're like, we stand a chance in this war with our cougars, but they're not acting like idiots in other ways where it's like the palace intrigue just seems like kids playing around. No, it does seem quite serious in the way they treat it.
Yeah, and I also think that the characters react pretty realistically, as best as that word can be used in the story, towards what happens. Like when he does get poisoned, they do go for the obvious accusation.
Yeah.
And when the killer is revealed, it's reasonable as to why they wanted to do that. So all of that shit is great. It's so funny to have a book that is so silly in some places and terrible
in others.
Yeah, and then just have functioning court intrigue happening at the same time.
Yeah, you're constantly just reminded of more conversations where people just learn about these Sasquatches.
The growing threat.
Yeah, and it's always written with such gravitas.
Yeah.
Once Amelia finally discovers that the article was written about actual Sasquatches, she's trying to come to terms with this. And she's like, okay, but really, even if they exist, what's the big deal? and again,
yeah, right.
I'm going to read it every single time they say this. Sam says, they have allies. Allies? What allies? Do other people know they exist? He says, no, they're not human allies. He said, knowing this will all be hard for her to take in. They have animals as allies, eagles, wolves, cougars, and even venomous snakes. Her shocked, pale face would be comical if it wasn't for the seriousness of the situation.
Oh my god.
Oh,
You'll
God,
never stop me and my snake allies.
A Sasquatch said, hissing as a diamondback curled around his ankles. When
they first meet the snake people, the snakes come out of the bushes,
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh shit, fuck, rattlesnakes. And then a Sasquatch comes out and he's like, you like my security squad? And they're like, oh shit, who's the Sasquatch with these snakes? And then all the snakes slither up his body, and then it literally says it makes him look like a modern day Medusa.
Yeah. And not only that, but the snake tribe people inject the snake's venom into their bodies to energize them, and all that stuff is really fun to read.
Yeah, it's really entertaining.
Yeah, the differences between the different tribes and how they partner with their chosen allies and that sort of thing. And again, that plays into the intrigue because the main kingdom king gets poisoned because of the snake venom, and there's interspecies conflict, there's extra species conflict, it's conflict between the humans because there's a war going on. It's man, the story's juggling a lot of things, and it doesn't actually fall apart. It's just told in such a comically silly way.
Yeah, and I think, again, all the subplots are great.
Yeah.
They're really good. Just the main plot is weak. Just the idea that the Sasquatch are allied with snakes and are rising up. Like, that basic thing just is so funny. Like, you can't...
Yeah, but at the same time, it's telling the story so well. You know, I always complain, like, oh, these stories have their A plot and their B plots are either non-existent or just a simple branch of their A plot, and they don't come together well. But in this story, you know, you've got that neighbor who their child died in the war, and he's also the one who shot Cole's little brother, the Sasquatch. And he's basically the reason the Sasquatch want to go to war now. And as Sam is making contact with Arella, the other Sasquatch lady, and like going back and forth and updating them on what the situation is, if humans are preparing for war, if the Sasquatches are preparing for war. And there are two big groups that don't really want to fight each other. You've just got little factions in them that are saying, look, we're friends, but on a broader scale, we're going to have trouble.
Yeah.
Like, Sasquatch and man cannot coexist, even though we understand each other on that level.
It's just not physically possible.
I'm trying to treat this with the seriousness that the story does.
And watch out, because we have allies. We have allies.
And so it's all getting very serious, and this guy who hates the Sasquatch goes off and murders the one they've been using to contact the other Sasquatch with, and they find him, like, up against a tree, ripped apart by the wolf allies, and and the whole subplot between them is really interesting. You know, he's like, Uncle Sam, you had everything I always wanted, and I'm the one who killed that Sasquatch, and I'm the one who raped your sister.
Yeah.
And Sam is like, oh shit, we know the Sasquatch are allied with wolves. And so him and Ben trade looks, and he says, why would wolves suddenly be attacking humans? Is this war? His voice low and soft. And it's like, And those lines are so frequent. Like, after word gets back to Grimald that his wife has been killed by this hunter in the scene I just described, he's looking at his wife's body. And, you know, Grimald is the one who originally wanted peace with the humans. And he takes one last glimpse down at his partner, turns back to his comrades, and letting out an angry hiss, he made eye contact, the rage evident. And he says, war! We start now. And then later on, they get one more letter from the Sasquatch before all contact is cut off. And it's just a one-word note that says, war! So funny. And then you've got all the conflict is building. Cole is addressing on the Sasquatch. He says, my fellow kin. His voice sure and clear. This has been a long time coming. Smiling, he swooped his left hand in front of them. You have all played a part in what is about to happen, and for that I am grateful. Loud cheers greeted him as he spoke, but when he put up his hand, all became quiet. Today is the day we take back our freedom and land. Today is the day we stop the murders. The crowd grew loud again, banging their fists against their chests and shouting, today will be a day of reckoning for man-beasts. Then it's getting so intense. The Sasquatch are ready to go to fucking war with the man-beasts.
And the snakes are hissing.
Yeah, the snakes are hissing, and the cougars are growling, and the wolves are barking, and the eagles are soaring. And then we get to the ending. And this is where the story kind of falls apart.
Sadly.
As part of the story develops, somehow one of the Sasquatches gets smallpox, and they discover this is a human disease, but the humans have already developed some sort of immunization towards it. And the smallpox starts spreading between the Sasquatch nations, and they don't know what to do. Their only recourse really is to ask the humans for help. And so they do, and the humans say, we'll give you the treatment for it if you call off the war. And frustrated, they do this. So they get the cure for the virus, the war is called off, but things are not settled between the Sasquatch and the man-beasts yet. Only for now. The end.
Yeah. It's such a... I mean, this book was all build up. It really was. So there was so much, and I was like, oh, like...
You called it off. And perhaps there will be another story in which some other conflict brews and actually necessitates the war. There's no reason why smallpox gets to the Sasquatch. They're like, oh, only a human could have given this to you. Have you been fraternizing with them? And they're just like, no, not really. And it's like, where did it come from then? Like, it can't be that the humans, like, gave them smallpox on purpose. They don't even know they exist yet.
Yeah. The annoying thing is, really, for me, is that this story... It didn't need 3 books. It can barely do 1 book. And it certainly doesn't need another one. And I just, it's becoming a trope of the books that we look at. I'm beginning to learn that ending a book is by far the hardest thing a writer has to do.
It must be, because, I mean, we've got such a poor track record in these books of actually being able to end it.
And no one can do it, really, at all. And I don't know why that is.
Well, except for Hard Target.
Well, yeah. Bacterium 264 also ends.
Yeah.
Well.
Sort of.
It ends. Yeah. But I think maybe there's some aspect of people confuse ending a story with being able to write further books in that series.
Yeah. I mean, clearly she is not done writing this series. Clearly the author has more plans for the Sasquatch and the man-beasts.
Yeah. And this book doesn't need that, nor does it deserve that.
No, and it's also an odd way to end it, because the conflict that we saw developed in this story
isn't resolved, really.
Well, it is resolved. The conflict between the Sasquatch tribes is resolved.
Yeah.
And the conflict between the humans is resolved, and the conflict between the Sasquatches and the humans are all resolved. And so I would have almost preferred, if you were going to write more in this series, to give us like a cliffhanger with something to look forward to. Because right now I'm feeling a little bit like, all right, well, you've run the track of the story you just started, but you clearly didn't finish it. So where do you start from next time? Yeah,
no, it's just very deflating. And the story was so grandiose that you wanted something else.
Yeah.
Sasquatch, win or lose, I wanted something else, you know?
Yeah. I want to see Sasquatch riding cougars. I want to see wolf squadrons.
I want to see Sasquatch like jumping down onto a balcony and like startled people going, oh my God, it's a Sasquatch. And then the Sasquatch raises his arms and like releases 2 snakes like that.
I would have loved to see that.
And like go straight for the jugular, you know?
Yeah.
But man, this book is worth it just for the dialogue. When Sam is addressing a bunch of people due to certain attacks and things like that, people being found dead in their beds and things of that nature.
Yeah.
And Sam is talking to a big crowd of people in the town. And it says, quote,
I know what's coming.
Standing, Sam tried to settle them down. All good questions, he said, looking around the room. The truth is going to be unbelievable, and I will understand your mind wrestling with what I am about to tell you. He paused, collecting his thoughts, as all eyes were on him, waiting. Nodding his head, he looked up and said one word. Sasquatch. Just like,
ooh, the chills, yeah.
And it also follows up with this quick line that he blah, 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 blah. And then he says, I myself have been in contact with one for decades. He speaks English.
Honestly, it's one of the funniest things I've read, and although the writing is extremely childish and at times so eye-rollingly stupid you can't help but laugh, again, it tells a better story than so many other books in season 2. And I want to specifically bring up Born of the Shade when I discuss this, because although Born of the Shade had maybe the best prose of the books we've read, at least in season 2, you know, the descriptions were colorful and they weren't poorly written. They just served the story so poorly. They were just endless exposition of the scene and just character biographies, and so overly complicated that I just couldn't care about any of it.
Yeah, as we said in that episode, like a sentence was good. You know, a single sentence, you would say that's a good sentence.
Yeah.
But like a paragraph, you're like, oh my God, that's either exposition or just terrible, you know, like whatever else.
Yeah.
And at like a chapter level, it's complete nonsense. And at a book level, it's a fucking joke.
It's garbage, yeah.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, you have this book, and the Sasquatch lore is pretty shallow, but at the same time, it's so much more interesting.
Yeah.
Like all the characters from Sasquatches to humans, they all have different personalities, so they don't all feel like the same person, just talking from a different head, like they kind of do in Blade of Voxia. Story has a decent amount of intrigue. Sasquatch culture is pretty interesting. And it actually tells a fucking story for once. And so I think the key takeaway here is that you can have good writing, but it doesn't matter if you don't tell a good story. And you can have really dumb writing, and I will enjoy it so much more if you actually tell me a story and you actually give me a character that I care about and want to see what happens to them.
Yeah. You can write a fucking story about fucking sea lettuce and buckets of salt rising up against the fucking manatees, and I will find it a much better story than a grandiose wizard tale set in London with all this brilliant magic and bullshit, you know?
Yeah.
Because nothing actually happens in that book. They just go to a fucking bar and drink. And that's bullshit. That is borderline offensive.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to tell when you pick up a book and you're investing time into it. It's not like you watch a movie and, I mean, some movies can be insulting if they're really, really bad, but it's very difficult to get that low, you know? Plus, when you read a book, you invest time into it, and it's difficult to tell after a certain point if it's actually going somewhere. And if it doesn't, that's a bad feeling.
Yeah, big time.
You know, and that's not something I really experienced before this podcast.
No, because if we started reading a book that has been featured on this show that we hate, we would put it down.
Yeah.
But now we suffer through it for your entertainment.
Yeah. And there are people out there. There are people out there right now that have bought Born of the Shade.
Yeah.
They picked that fucking book up and they bought it. And what? They got fucking scammed.
Yeah.
They got fucking taken to the fucking dry cleaners. And that's bullshit. And we're the knights in the depths of fucking Amazon shit hole list. You know, like we're down there fighting off all the bad stories.
Yeah.
Putting them down.
We're tossing a flare up out of the pit and saying, don't come here.
There's monsters. There's some ugly ass shit.
Yeah. Stay away.
There's Sasquatches, and they have allies.
Don't come down here. There's snakes.
Oh my god.
So that was Beasts, War of Reckoning.
That was it.
And war, I don't know. I don't know if there was a war. Not really. There was a little bit of reckoning.
Yeah.
Some old plots did come back to bite both human and Sasquatch alike.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they're actually not so different, human and Sasquatch.
No.
I've come to learn from reading this story.
Yeah, they're a progressive race, and, we should stop hunting them for money.
Yeah.
Definitely stop hunting them for money. Let them live.
I know, yeah.
Let them live in their canyony retreats.
Yeah, otherwise there will be a war of reckoning.
We don't want that.
And it involves animals that just are not to be trifled with. I mean...
Cougars! Yeah. I'm telling you, cougars are coming.
Yeah, I mean, we only got to see what the Sasquatch Nation looks like in America. I mean, imagine what kind of allies they have worldwide.
Oh, my God.
Imagine how they got in Australia. What about the scorpion tribes?
and the Yetis with their mountain goats, of course.
Yeah, I mean, come on. There's a lot of this world to explore, and I want to see what happens next in Beasts War Reckoning. But in the meantime, the next book we're going to read, which I have huge expectations for, my expectations are astronomical for this one, is a book called Vigilante Reloaded, subtitle Hard Boiled 1 by author Jack Wade. And it goes like this: part John Wick, part Jason Bourne, all mayhem. Veteran detective Angus Sullivan has a bad attitude, a smart mouth, and a keen understanding of the criminal mind. Those things and a little bit of luck have kept him alive, but Angus's luck is about to be put to the ultimate test. When every clue in a robbery gone wrong points to a unit of corrupt cops, Angus is forced to corrupt the cop culture he's been a part of his entire career. Hunted, alone, and with no place left to turn, Angus embarks on a pedal-to-the-metal, action-packed hell ride down into the gutters, where right and wrong quickly become twisted and problems are solved with gunfire and bloodshed. Angus will put his own morality on the line, but will he become the very monster he set out to destroy? This explosive thriller is perfect for fans of heroes who shoot first and ask questions later. Start reading to experience Angus Sullivan's pulse-pounding rampage now!
Oh my god, I hope it is actually a rampage and not a fucking bullshit, like...
Hard-boiled, dude!
It's hard-boiled, like my eggs. I mean, like... It was the title. It was the title, wasn't it? It was the fact that it's called Hard-Boiled.
Vigilante Reloaded Hard-Boiled.
Vigilante Reloaded Boiled. Oh my god.
Will the next book be called Vigilante Reloaded Scrambled?
Vigilante Reloaded Omelette.
Just for note, Vigilante Reloaded is not like the main title of this series. The first book is called Vigilante Reloaded Hard Boiled, and the second book is called Out of Exile Hard Boiled 2. And the third book is called Bullet Storm Hard Boiled 3. So the series is not Vigilante Reloaded, it's actually Hard Boiled.
Hard Boiled. Oh my god.
He's boiled hard, man.
He's boiled, yeah, he's cooked to perfection.
And so we've got Jack Quaid, and he is another author similar to one of our favorite authors, Paul Bishop.
Stephen Mertz too, perhaps?
Yeah, it says between the years 1980 and 1999, American novelist Jack Quaid produced a series of fun and wild stories where anything could happen. And with Quaid behind the typewriter, they usually did.
Uh-oh.
Kind of a funny thing to put in your own synopsis, like that only sometimes.
I don't even know what I'm writing.
All my books were only fun and wild sometimes. He called these books the Electric Mayhem series. Jack Quaid was born in West Hollywood, California in 1953. He had won a scholarship to UCLA, but dropped out after 6 months for a reason that, to this day, remains unknown. Okay.
Okay.
2 years later, he sold his first short story to Startling Mystery magazine. But it was the publication of his novel, The City on the Edge of Tomorrow, in 1980, and the film adaptation starring Bruce Dern that set him on his way. Fearing his initial success would fade, Quaid wrote obsessively for the next 2 decades and published under many pseudonyms. It's unknown just how many books he's produced during the period,
oh God.
But despite the name on the jacket, savvy readers always knew they were reading a Jack Quaid novel within the first few pages. His books have been long out of print, and now they live on the dusty shelves of secondhand bookstores and in the memories of those who have been lucky enough to read them. Quaid's current whereabouts are unknown. Wow.
It's such a mystery, eh?
Yeah, we don't know where he is. So we've got a missing author here whose stories are legendary, apparently, and are usually quite fun and wild.
Oh, God.
So, hard boiled.
Oh, God.
We're going to put ourselves in a steaming pot, peel the shell off. We're going to come out soft.
Eat the yolk right out of me. Good. Thank you everyone for listening and supporting the show. And please, if you can, support us on Patreon, and doubly so, share our podcast with your friends. It's a huge help, and thank you to all of those who already do that. If you have a book you want us to look at, share it with us on one of our platforms and we'll consider it for the show. Thanks!